Welcome, everybody, to Radicalized Truth Survives. My name is Heidi Kuda, and today High Fidelity and I have the distinct honor of interviewing a very prolific poet and author, Romanian-born Andrei Codrescu, and he's going to talk to us about his latest poetry book, How to Live Under Fascism. Have a listen. Thank you so very much for being with us today, Andrei Codrescu. I hope I said that close to correct. We are thrilled to have you. You're a poet, author, screenwriter, all the good things. But where I want to start with you, which is so important to me, is a decade ago, my very first ally in what was the real resistance to Trump back in 2016. And I say real because there's been a lot of controlled opposition, resistance, etc. He was Romanian American, and he taught me so much. But he not only taught me about what it was like to grow up whispering in his own house, but he taught me how totalitarianism, it always starts with the silencing of truth. And would you mind bringing our viewers into whatever you want to share with us about what it was like growing up under, doesn't matter what people call it, communism, etc., but really what it is this authoritarian structure where people's freedoms are diminished. And I would love for you to give us kind of a briefing on that before we get into your poetry.
Yes. Well, I was born in Romania at the very height of the censorship and silencing of oppositions. And I remember two moments actually that sort of defined the whole period for me because I was very young. I remember when Stalin died in 1953, and they let us leave school, and everyone was crying. Children were crying, and grown-ups were crying, and I was crying, and I got home. And my stepfather and a friend were sitting at the table in the kitchen, and I slipped under the table because I was crying and I didn't want them to see me. And then I heard my stepfather, "Isn't it great that the son of a bitch is dead?" And his friend said, "Yes, that's great." It's sort of, my world kind of froze at that moment because we were always taught that Stalin was the protector of children. There were big posters of him with a bunch of kids smiling. I sort of grew under the shadow of his mustache. And so, that moment was, sort of radical for me. And I realized that people were crying not because of Stalin, but they were crying because of their own sorrows, their own, their own poverty and their own misery and the fact that they couldn't talk about anything. Now, after Stalin died, things relaxed a little bit, and then we had a culture that you couldn't speak out loud about anything of importance, or of not familiar. And you couldn't get your news anywhere because the newspapers were just lies. Everything in the newspaper was a lie, except for the sports scores. Even those are lies sometimes. And so we got the news in various ways. My mother sent me to get the bread early in the morning, about 5 o'clock, before they ran out of the store, and there was usually a line. So in the line, people talked about this and that. So when I got home, whether I got the bread or not, my mother, her first question was, "What did you hear in the line?" She didn't care whether I got the bread. She wanted to see how things were. So we took the temperature of the place in a way through gossip, and the other way was through jokes, because everybody made jokes that were political in a certain way, even if they weren't. They had some reference to our conditions, and the culture of the joke was the culture from I would say 60 through the fall of the regime in 1989. And the joke got more and more ubiquitous, and it was the only culture we had in common. People would tell jokes. So the last joke told before the Ceausescu's, the dictator, and his wife were executed in 1989, was a joke about a guy who's has a gun and he goes very close to the couple in the middle of a big crowd and fires and misses both of them. And so the secret police arrests him, and the exasperated interrogator says, "You're so close. How could you miss?" And he says, "It was the crowd. They kept saying, shoot her, shoot him, shoot her, shoot him." And then 2 weeks later, they were both executed. So this is, was a joke that turned very real in a very short time.
Wow,
So,
thank you. Oh my gosh, thank you so much for that intro. You painted such an incredible picture. Somehow you found yourself hanging out with beat poets on the Lower East Side. I don't know what happened to bring you from that world of silence to this world of like technicolor writing and just such, vivid portrayals of that period of time. I would love to hear a little bit about that.
well, I got away from a country that was pretty much black and white and very boring. The only wall advertisements were the 9 members of the Central Committee of the Communist Party with their triple chins looking down at us. And I got out into the West, into a world of color and explosive color in Italy and Naples in 1965. And there were gigantic women eating chocolates, and there were books that I could buy without being asked questions. It was amazing. I mean, it was just, and I was 19 years old, so it was the great time to be, to make a break and be in another world. And then from Italy, I came to the United States and went to Detroit, where there were riots at the time. In 1966, when I got to Detroit, it was, I met poets and I met musicians at John Sinclair's Poets and Writers Workshop on John Lodge Expressway, a group of artists and poets, and it was also the headquarters of the coalition against the war in Vietnam. There are, anarchists and, a great, group of people that appealed both to my youth and to my sense of rebellion, which I had since I was 12. And so these people, were my first guides into music, into poetry, into the countercultural America that was still black and white back then, still sort of beat flavored, beat related, beat adjacent. And one day, the sign over the writers and jazz and writers workshop changed to color, and it said, "Come on, people, why love one another right now." So LSD had arrived and the hippie age was on, and that was even more amazing to me because I felt the generosity of my generation because I could crash anywhere. I met people, and it was the 60s were on. And it was an incredible moment, both well, for me, it was an incredible moment, but it was an incredible moment for America. And, I never quit that sense that we must resist the system, whatever it was. And, then I became a fairly articulate or inarticulate critic of what I saw as oppressive.
Oh, I've got many questions, but hi-fi, you go ahead and jump in.
So the way I first came to know you was through NPR and All Things Considered, where you were a prolific commentator. As a matter of fact, that's one of the few things my father and I still love together is to listen to you and those old programs. But my question to you is, what do you think about what the Trump regime has done to NPR and the Voice of America and those voices that used to transmit the American experience?
Well, the Trump regime is trying to destroy it all. It's trying to get rid of free speech. It is on its way to becoming an authoritarian country, very much like the one I grew up in. And that has to be, it's one of it's the first or second item in the Constitution is free speech and freedom of the press, and he is on a path of destroying those through the power of money, blackmail, and criminal, illegal uh, moves. And so, you know, what happens is that we can speak, but our platforms have been. We have to reinvent the platforms, like this one, where we can not report, but speak. Even you mentioned whispers before. In Romania, everybody whispered if they had anything serious to talk about, and we don't want to become that country of whispers, because whatever they say on the right or the left, Americans have a way of speaking their ideas and opinions out loud, and it is going to be an agora, a public place where everybody is going to have a voice, and it's not going to be who's the loudest, but who has the facts and the authority to do it, and somehow resist the big money and the surveillance state that's being built for us. The surveillance police state is what Trump is making.
Brilliant question and response. Thank you so much for that, Andre. I have seen over and over again, we've had many guests on the show. Dr. Marcy Shore comes to mind. She wrote a book called The Ukrainian Night and documented the Maidan Revolution. And she also wrote a book called Caviar and Ashes, and she's a intellectual historian. She always weaves poetry, a lot of Eastern European poetry and Polish poetry through her explanations of history and what it means for today. And why do you think poetry is always such a threat to any power hungry regime, authoritarian regime? Going back to Stalin's purge of Ukrainian poets in the executed Renaissance, through your experiences in Romania, to what we're actually seeing now with these attacks on academic universities in America. Why is poetry such a threat?
Well, there are a number of two reasons. Mainly, is one is that nobody knows what poetry is, and that makes people very uncomfortable. Uh, if you don't know what it is, it's probably not something you would like, or you can subdue. So even the poets that were persecuted by Stalin and the authoritarian regimes were not exactly writing political poetry, except that it was a poetry of life that was somehow subversive. And then the other reason is that authoritarian regimes pay a lot of attention to words. The words, revolution, even in Russia, a revolution started with the printing shop, the word. In 1960s, we had the mimeograph machines, and we were able to do things very fast, to print poetry and pass it on to people on the street. Now we have other kinds of media like this one, where we can instantly reach people, and so with words. And authoritarians fear words. They are afraid of language. That's why we have now AI, which makes another language altogether. But the language is the enemy, and so poetry is a very heightened form of language that makes everybody uneasy.
Oh, that's just incredible. So I would like to now talk about, you've written many uh, books of poetry and books in general, but your latest, How to Live Under Fascism, I'd love to talk about your inspiration, and then anything you can actually tell us about of combining the image with the words. And this particular one, the title-based poem, How to Live Under Fascism, is incredible. I'd love for you to either read a few lines or just kind of respond, because I think it's very important. We have a global audience, but we have a lot of Americans who are seeking help right now.
Well, the book was written before the Trump really showed all of his colors, and it was mainly it started out as poems that were about Ukraine and Putin and uh, the threat that he deployed against Eastern Europe and Romania and the entire formerly Soviet um, um, zone. So, how to live under fascism, uh, of course, works in both senses. How to live under fascism. I wear the uniform of your occupation. I am the nurse who walks with great aplomb, with soft shoes, crisp white bonnet, and the bomb in my leather bag. I've come to see the colonel. He hurts from signing warrants, sitting on his ass. Black coats, let me get through these doors. I have a match and kerosene. I need to see the boss. I think of it every time I drag my chains to work. So,
Snap,
it's
snap, 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 snap.
Yeah.
That is amazing.
so yeah, that is, the most radical solution I could think of, and the one that certainly is the last one if the words don't succeed.
It's incredible. I'm sure you've probably seen the film Battle of Algiers, which was made to look like a documentary film, but I will never forget the moment when there was uh, kind of a press interrogation of one of the quote unquote terrorists who all the media was saying, how could you have a picnic basket bomb? And how could you have committed such an atrocity in that cafe? And he says, I will gladly take one of your carpet bombing planes that you're using in Vietnam in exchange for my picnic basket. And for me, it was just such an incredible lesson to what happens when people are colonized, marginalized, when their freedoms are taken away. And I've never forgotten it. And I think that Americans failed to look further over the shores to see what was happening in other countries and what happened in history, because I think that there was a failure of imagination that it could happen here. And as you see the things that Trump is doing with your lens of having been born in Romania and having kind of a keen insight to the nature of these types of regimes, what are you seeing and what would you like people to pay attention to?
What is new about our situation now is the ubiquity of the surveillance state, is the fact that everyone is under observation, and everyone who has an iPhone can be found. And your GPS is telling them it's not the old way that they operated in the Soviet Union, where they had to have plumbers walk in and or even in the water gates and stick little things in your phone. And now everyone is can be found. Um, that's one part of it. And the other one is that there has been a maturing of the authoritarian philosophy of fascism in that they know that they must collect the data first. And all of the so-called dodge, whatever Musk was doing, was to take all that data and consolidate it and have all of our information.
So I'm a slight student of history. I find the way things transgress to be a good indicator of what's going to happen in the future. And when we look at the East German Stasi or we look at the Securitate in Romania, uh, what they used was data to oppress people. And in your book, Living Under Fascism, specifically Circling the Drain, you talk about the scourge of big data and the things wrong with it. But I really like the fact that on the back, the Dante ha lasciato fuori un moderno. You excoriate Elon Musk. What is it about big data and Elon Musk that sets off your alarms?
Well, it's clearly the only thing you can do with that much data is trained an AI or several AIs uh, to do whatever you want them to do because they know they have more data. These large language systems are extraordinary because they can be used by whoever has the data in any way they want. And as far as Musk is obviously using it for uh, his industries for his financial purposes, but also he had the kind of he made a huge mistake by mixing in politics. That would seem like a mistake, but it wasn't. Like everything that the Trump administration does, it was the gathering of data, the creating of training AIs to further surveillance and he lost and then he threw him under the bus so that Musk is now his companies are in crisis and he himself is being but he played an extraordinary evil role in uh, in what he did, which is to go through all the government as even the very useful people in government and fire them. I mean, it's an extraordinary thing. Tens of thousands of them. So he is, because of his money and his power and his companies, he was able to do for Trump what probably only Goering could do for Hitler or Beria for Stalin.
Brilliant, yes. And, Hi-Fi called his takeover of Twitter a $44 billion psyop cannon to our heads. And he also mentioned, that the hack that he did when Trump first came into power the second time was absolutely the greatest hack probably in history. High fidelity.
I worry that the average American is too caught up in reality TV and trying to feed their kids, and they're not paying attention to what is going on in our country right now. The fact that we are throwing black and brown people into concentration camps. What would you say to those people to break through their just lack of attention?
Well, our problem now is that if you are not black or brown or an immigrant, you are comfortable and you are hypnotized. And so one thing to take is to wake us up from this hypnosis of the media, So on the one hand, I mean, I don't have 5 minutes in the day when I'm not somehow involved with some kind of with somebody's opinion or some kind of media input. So, I'm not sure, how you can break that spell, And I think until uh, these policies reach the point where people are hungry and food is too expensive and suddenly the utilities make a big difference in your earnings, then you will see everybody who is not at the moment persecuted and targeted uh, wake up. But I don't know if any kind of rhetoric, any kind of all of our efforts, and that includes poetry, will do anything to, especially poetry, to wake people up. So you there are, and you cannot even use any of the revolutionary tools that were used in the past to wake society up. So There has to be some kind of, another kind of pandemic, if you like, in which people will be isolated and will have to come together because there is no other way to react, So, the same thing that, with you're talking about immigration. They now
I
yeah, I mean, they're making those, a double surveillance anklet, a GPS anklet that will tell you where everybody is at the same time. So the iPhone is not enough, I mean, they need another layer of, and it is about creating fear, creating paranoia, So what's the countering to paranoia?
Yeah, that's just, I always appreciate it when, uh, when people with your expertise just give it to you straight, no chaser. It's like, there is no simple fix and no simple way out. But again, going back to Romania, there are moments in time when things change in what Marcy Shore calls an Augenblick. And is there any hope that you see? And I think you're right. I think things have to get bad enough for everybody to then come together and look at each other and realize we're not supposed to be fighting our neighbors. It's the billionaires who have, used authoritarian capture on our country. Is there anything that you can see that you can tell people that can happen in those moments where there can be a sea change?
Well, yes, I think that the Trump can administration can collapse from within. Trump is right now his own supporters are uh, deserting him because of the not because of but because of their ideas of who the enemy was, and now they realize that the enemy is actually the guy who led them to that place. And so, that's a moment. This is a moment that is very good. But then you look, at who follows, and it is very well thought out. I mean, you don't want J.D. Vance, who is probably a bigger threat than Trump because Trump is
Right.
often busy. So. Um, but I think that losing their base will be a moment of catharsis, and they will lose it
Ah,
because everything they hated about, what they thought the Democrats are doing, and the sex traffickers and the secret slavery and all these networks are in fact belong to the administration. They belong to Trump and his people. So yeah, there will be a collapse from within, and that will be a good time, to enter the conversation, but not in an intellectual way or even through poetry, but simply into how these people can be shown another way at that point, because they will feel disoriented, they will feel helpless. And this is actually going on to some extent, and I hope that that old streak of American individualism, whether it is from the right or the left, that sense of rebellion that that's that caused the revolution, that caused us to leave the British, will also kick in. And you'll have, the kind of 19th century, you know, enterprise and rebellion, that's still there. That's one way or not. Now it's on the right, but it could just as easily be on the left. But
thank you so much. No, that would be really something to see that, and I do hope there will be that moment of catharsis. We are so grateful that you took the time to be with us today, and I would love nothing more than for you to end on one of your favorite poems that might also speak to some of what you've been saying, if you'd be willing to.
all right. Well, I'm going to read So What is Political Poetry? Because one of the things people talk about is we must write political poetry. Well, yes, we must write political songs, I think. I think if you wrote a song called, as the anarchists did, Turn the Guns Around, then you'll have one kind of encouragement um, to rebellion. But this is a real poet's question. What is political poetry? Rhetoric refusing its prior premise, a proud being asking for what's not his, a penniless librarian at the free library, the CEO who's an echo of himself, the exceptionalist in normcore shorts, the ghost bug squished on the glass plate, socialism in its verbal youth, cosmogony drafted from metaphors of justice, executives of the freedom to loiter, accidental rhymes in the park of headless statues, dusty podiums and second-hand microphones, boredom wearing clothes from the movies, hearts stirred with ice cream sticks of first love, toy guns pointed at robots with pocket nukes, or Neruda mixing vodka with rum at a Congress bar. I could go on, but I've been left alone in the car. So, what's effective, I mean, in terms of,
Snap, snap, snap. That was freaking beautiful. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for being with us here today. High Fidelity. Any final thoughts?
I just want to say thank you for your time, sir.
oh, thank you. Yeah, it was a good conversation. Thank you.
This was quite beautiful. Thank you kindly.
A pleasure.